Hey everyone, welcome back to another one of my videos. Today we're going to be talking about a psychological theory from our BFF, Freud. So I'm a huge fan of Freud, but I know that there's some controversy with his theories, especially his psychoanalytic theory and similar ones.
Oh, thanks for the analysis, Dr. Freud.
We're just going to look at his theory in regards to the id, the ego, and the superego. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, I've been seeing a lot of stuff in the healing journey realm on TikTok. And I've been seeing a lot of stuff with shadow work. And so I remember hearing about shadow work in class, but I never really knew too much about it. And I really want to bring awareness to shadow work, but also like the id, ego, and superego has a lot to deal with that. And I feel like talking about it. So today we're going to talk about Mr. Freud, Mr. Sigmund Freud. The human psyche is composed of three parts to a personality. So according to Freud, all of these elements, these three elements, work together to create a complex human psyche and human behaviors. So each one has its own unique role. So the id, we'll start with the id. It's the most, so when you look at an iceberg floating on water, the most that's hidden underneath, because usually the top of the iceberg is small and then the bottom is like a huge mass, that's the id. The id would be the most unconscious, okay? So think of it as like the unconscious is mainly underwater, hidden. So according to Freud, the id is pretty much the primary component of personality. It's present from birth. It's the only component present from birth, and it's entirely unconscious, and it consists of primitive behaviors, instinctive behaviors, and stuff full of desires, wants, and needs, and it looks for immediate gratification. It's pretty much the pleasure principle of all of this stuff. And if these needs are not met, they result in a state of anxiety or tension. So it's like, oh my God, I need that, I want it, it's instinctive, it's primitive. That's kind of like the roundabout of the id. It's like a crying baby wanting food, wanting to sleep, whatever the demand is. So immediately fulfilling these needs are not always realistic and possible. That's why there's those other two components, the ego and the superego, that work together to pretty much check the id and make sure that the id is, socially acceptable, that these behaviors are morally right, that there's problem solving happening, that this behavior would not be disruptive and socially unacceptable. Like, it's pretty much to check our id, which is unconscious, our unconscious mind. Okay, so let's jump into the ego. So according to Freud, the ego develops from the id and ensures that the impulses of the id can be expressed in an acceptable and socially right way in the real world. The ego is the personality component responsible for dealing with reality. The ego is the front. The ego is what people see. The id is hidden, like the unconscious mind. And the ego is pretty much everything. It's the conscious, preconscious, and unconscious minds. And then we're going to go into the superego. Oh, the superego. It is so super.
Very good.
It's that moral compass. It consists of the conscience, and the ego. Your conscience is making you feel guilty or prideful. Your ego ideal is kind of the rules and standards for behaviors that the ego aspires. It's the ideal self. So your superego is like what you aspire to be. Now, you may not reach your ideal self all the time, but it's really what you aspire to be. So think of it as like it's the most perfect and civilized of all of our behaviors. Alright, so now why am I talking about this stuff? Well, first of all, I find it interesting, but also let's tie this into shadow work because I am interested in that. So I've been seeing a lot of shadow work, and I wanted to read a little something that I found about it. So, personality is a very complex thing. Now, there's a lot of books on personality. There's a lot of quizzes you can take. What's this personality? What's that? I mean, let's face it, we're all interested in finding out more about who we are, our real self, and digging down deep. So shadow work does that, really. It looks at who we are, some maybe unresolved trauma, some inner child trauma, stuff for us to really focus on our healing and get to a better place, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So it looks at the depths and intricacies of our personalities, and to do significant, meaningful, progressive work on a personal development level, which takes strength, courage, time, and honesty. And related to Carl Jung, I don't know. Listen, I'm a school psychologist, but sometimes I can't pronounce these words. He was a student of Mr. Freud. He was optimistic, Carl, and hopeful about the essence of individuals, and believed that people could improve their lives with self-reflection, analysis, and awareness. So Mr. Jung he's awesome, okay? Freud is a little bit more like, you're doomed. Carl is like, you got this. So that's what we like to see. That's the kind of energy I love. And there's a lot of shadow work that's out there. But let's dig a little bit deeper. It's an unconscious aspect of the personality that does not correspond with the ego ideal, leading the ego to resist and project the shadow. Pretty much, the shadow is being suppressed by the ego, and it is within us, but isn't easy to reach. So that's why a lot of people do a lot of reflection, like Carl Jung was talking about, helping us figure out how to bring that shadow to the surface. It's like a blind spot, pretty much. The ego ideal is pretty much what you want to get to. So the shadow is conceptually the blind spot of the psyche, the repression of one's id, while maladaptive prevents shadow integration. So a lot is being suppressed. Like I said, it's like it works as like a defense mechanism. And then another interesting thing is that the shadow of the self may appear in dreams and visions. So that's why looking into like the meaning and symbolism of dreams, you know, it's like, it's fascinating to me, but it's also like there is some truth to it. You know, it's not just like stuff that we see and are exposed to in our day-to-day. Like I do believe that there are some symbolism to dreams and symbolism to hypnosis, what comes out of it. There's a lot that we suppress, and that's what makes it so interesting, because it's like there are ways to actually bring that to the surface. And so maybe another video I could talk more about bringing that to the surface. We can do another video completely on shadow work, but for the most part, this was kind of like, what is the id, ego, and superego? Why is it important? Introducing shadow work to you, and definitely want to do a video on shadow work, because I feel like there's so much healing that could take place, and I would love to raise some more awareness of shadow work. I feel like, you know, I'm definitely tempted in getting the journal that I've been seeing on TikTok, because it just looks so like, wow, I need this. Like I saw it and I was like, I need this. So stay tuned for another video, and we'll talk a little bit more about shadow work. Thank you. Comment down below on things you'd like to see on here. Like, share, subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Bye, guys.